It's the start of another week, which means it's time for another Road to Gold. Welcome to War Games on Toast, all of you lovely people. It's me, it's Toast. How are you doing today? Last week, I managed to have 2 games with my Untamed Beast, and those games were pretty darn interesting because I learned a fair amount about my list and what I could maybe change, not necessarily within the list, but how I approach the game, because I now have a greater understanding of my list's weaknesses, which is interesting because the week prior I had games with this exact same list that were incredibly dominant, which taught me my strengths. So this week is definitely a reflection on what happened and hopefully a ramble, a diatribe, a gush about how I can maybe improve my play going forward. So let's dive right in. Before I get into all that though, please be sure to like, subscribe and drop a comment down below, as well as potentially join my Patreon like all these wonderful people on screen now, badoosh, as all of this helps me fight against that dastardly YouTube algorithmic demon and by extension helps support the channel. You can also help support the channel by going to Element Games, badoosh, using my affiliate link. But with all of that out of the way, let's get on with the show.
And now for something completely different.
And we are back, and the list I was running is on screen now, badoosh. And this list is incredibly fun to play. It's Untamed Beast cross Ephelim's Pandemonium with the True Blood. And man, this list is just damaging enough that it can kind of hold its own against not pure murder factions. And it's incredibly tricky with this mobility, with its control. It's got 2 pulls, it's got a net. It's all kinds of fun. And it really operates on this idea that you overwhelm your opponent with the things you can do, because Ephelim can influence the board in so many ways, and that overwhelming nature really plays to your benefit and plays into the theme of Ephelim's Pandemonium. They are Tzeentch based. They are possibly the best Tzeentch stuff you can take, and when you have so many things you can do, it's like having the tides of fate before you, and you know how it's going to end, but your opponent is just flailing in the dark, trying to predict it, but it's all too fickle and only you can see the true truth. And it's kind of funky to play. Now, the first time I played this list, it was very, very fun. It was against 2 Cruelboys lists of vastly different types. And I think it's safe to say that with a little bit of dice luck, in conjunction with having just a rock-solid game plan, how I want to win those games, that it played very, very well. Now, my first game this week, however, was against GORGER MAWPACK. Nothing special. Nothing special. This was a 1-box GORGER MAWPACK list, and it was really difficult to deal with because it really tackled one of the things my list does not do well. So my list is very control based. I control space, I do things, I stop your big things doing things. Now I have a limit to how many titans I can stop, and GORGER MAWPACK bring arguably the most, having 5 actual like Titan-esque models on the board that all move fast, all have charge, and all do massive damage into a warband that is incredibly squishy, right? Ephelim stuff are all toughness 3. Most of my warbands toughness 3. There's only 2 exceptions off the top of my head that aren't toughness 3, and those guys only have 15 to 20 wounds. So they die very quickly to the Gorgers. And this was a massive problem, and I didn't know how to deal with it. After around about turn 2, I basically got overwhelmed. Unfortunately, I did forget to take screenshots of this one, so I'll just put random Gorger pictures on the screen and enjoy that, I guess. This list was, again, just a pure 1-box GORGER MAWPACK, and how it started was he had a Rampage ready to go. He had a Rampage right off the bat, a long range, it was a quad 5. So we're very, very fast on turn 1 with one of his guys and just smash into my guys. And it's a kill mission, so it really plays into his warband's strengths. So what happened was, I decided that I need to set up my guys in a way that I can control the oncoming ogres on turn 2 as reinforcements, whilst also baiting an ogre who's got a rampage into rampaging into something I don't really care about. Which was, in this case, Kindlefinger, because with Rampage, he could get straight into my Hearty Ass, straight into my First Fang, and they might just die to a Rampaging Ogre, and they are way more valuable than a Kindlefinger. So the plan was, move Kindlefinger forward, and basically body block, right? The guy had run in and attack Kindlefinger. He did kill Kindlefinger, naturally, so he did score points that turn for killing Kindlefinger, but with a cheeky pull and my Heartier, I did manage to take a massive chunk out of this Ogre, setting this Ogre up for death on turn 2, which should hopefully catch up. Now, the other reason I really wanted Kindlefinger to die was the secondary objective. So how the secondary works in this mission, I believe it's called Endless Struggle, is if you're losing, you get to activate an objective. And there's 4 or 5 on the board, and if I'm behind on turn 1, I get first pick of the first objective. Once the objective's active, well then I have a way to potentially score points that isn't based on killing, and that was really important for this game, and it did warp the game somewhat in my favour as the turns go on. Turn 2 happens, I blend down his Ogre that was injured, that's great for me, and importantly I managed to delay his push by netting his clawback, and this is important because all of his guys were coming down the long table edge opposite me, and there was a lot of terrain there, a lot of terrain he had to navigate through to get past, and his clawback had positioned himself in such a way that his Ogres physically couldn't fit past to get to the rest of my warband. He's now netted, is completely fine. What I completely missed, however, was the fact that Gorgers are still incredibly fast, and they could just climb over this building and they charge in and start killing things, and this led to the untimely death of Apotrax, which is kind of unfortunate. However, I was able to get F-Lim into position, spawn one into position, and start throwing out wizard bolts and doing some cheeky things, and to start chunking down some of his Ogres in some fairly cheeky ways. At the end of turn 2, things are really starting to turn around, because now I've got a kill, I've got an objective, and one of his Ogres is now pretty low on wounds and ready to die on my next turn. Things then take a huge turn for the worse, because I lose initiative on turn 3, and then I concede so many points. He immediately takes advantage of this, sends in a Howler, I believe, and just beats my Trueblood to death before I could throw in the roadblock again and block down that clawback. And this opens up my entire warband to being mostly beaten to death. This ultimately does lead to the death of Spawnmore and the Trueblood. However, I did manage to sneak a kill of my own, and this ultimately meant that going into turn 4, because on turn 3 he got to make an objective active, right? So he had that objective too. Going into turn 4, we were tied. And this is pretty darn important because I am really on the back foot now. He's lost 2 Ogres. I've lost a whole bunch of my support pieces. I can't really hold back the flow of murder coming my way. And this meant that I just had to start throwing bodies in front of him and hoping for the best. And it did actually work. I moved a Plains Runner near to his objective, but not quite on it. And I'll explain why in a little bit. To lure one of his Ogres to go and kill him, and he does move up and then kills him, but it took 2 actions, which was a gamble, granted, but it paid off, and nice. Right, his Ogre's on the edge of the objective, still on his objective, and the sneaky plays are ready to go. Then his other Ogres move off to fight and kill other things, and he goes into combat with my Heartier. The Heartier absolutely goes to town, kills one guy, and then gets killed himself. That's not great, but it is what it is. And then the sneaky play happens. I have a 111 in my back pocket, and my Heartier lobs out a harpoon, pulls in the Ogre who is on the objective, pulls him off the objective, if only slightly, and ends up like 1.2 inches away from my Heartier, which is perfect because then my Heartier is not engaged. He moves around the Ogre, gets on the objective. I now hold 2 objectives, and that ends the game in a tie. And what a tie it was incredibly difficult to pull off that tie. On turn 4, it really looked like I was going to be beaten to death and just overwhelmed, but a little bit of luck on that Plains Runner and some precise positioning and basically hoping he placed his Ogre in such a way based on my positioning and the terrain placement that I could use a 1-inch pull by spending my wild dice to make a 111 to pull this Ogre the perfect distance to not engage my guy to score the objective on the last turn. That is a mixture of luck, positioning, skill, and more luck. But it did work in the end, and the Heartier getting a kill before he died also helped balance out the fact that he died. So that's pretty darn cool too. And this game was excellent. It was so much fun to play. I was on the back foot longer than I perceived at first. So my Trueblood netting his clawback was huge, right? That was a big play. Me not seeing the dangers of ogres just climbing and charging over and beating him to death, like that was a bit of a mistake, right? That was a big blunder. Losing the Trueblood was huge, but ultimately him having 5 ogres and me not having the best methods to kill them. I did kill 3 in the end, but me not having the best methods of dealing with those ogres in the grand scheme of things meant that losing my 2 major support pieces, that being Apatrax and the Trueblood, that was bad, right? And I didn't really see that error until like the end of turn 2, and then it dawned on us that if I don't get initiative, it's going downhill very quickly. And then, of course, I didn't get initiative, and it went downhill very quickly. So there is that. Had I managed to net the clawback again, or the howler, or something else, I think it would have been a lot more controllable. But that's on my misplay, right? I have to be careful when there's so many titans. Netting the key piece in his warband becomes much harder to determine because there's so many. And whilst I think the clawback was definitely the right choice, my positioning to net the clawback was completely off. That was a mistake and a half, and that was. But positioning elsewhere, I do think was more or less on point, with the sacrificial plains runner and the sacrificial kindle finger basically luring ogres into very specific positions where I could capitalize and ultimately either get kills or score points in some way. I think was pretty spicy. But my opponent was absolutely fantastic. It was a really fun game. GORGER MAWPACK are not the best warband in the game. They are incredibly swingy. They do thrive in a kill mission. But I went into this game with a degree of confidence because GORGER MAWPACK are not perceived as very good. And whilst I don't necessarily like to believe the hype of perceptions on tier lists, sometimes that happens, and I did not expect Gorgers to be such a hurdle, and they were a massive hurdle for this list. Fast-moving titans, multiple fast-moving titans, and this list immediately starts to struggle. High wound numbers, that ain't great, like 30 wounds on each guy, 35 on that clawback, even with only toughness 3 on his guys. So everyone's hitting his guys on like a 3+, right? Even with that advantage, it really is a struggle to get all of those pieces in place to kill even just a single Gorger. And thankfully, I had a Heart Eater, and who knew that a Heart Eater with his blendy-ass profile just mulches through Gorgers? I mean, he's good. I didn't think he was Gorger killing good, but he was. He killed 2 of them by himself, so that's pretty darn spicy. Going on to game 2, though, this was against Cruelboys in a very similar list to the list I played last week on the last Road to Gold, and it's against the same player, Joe, and Joe's a fantastic guy to play against. I had a lot of fun in the first game and the second game, and yeah, this second game was pretty darn spicy. Basically, how this mission works is that if you are in the lead, you get absolutely shafted with a twist. This is again a ferocious Gnarlwood mission. I'll put it on screen now if I remember, badoosh. And yeah, this mission is an absolute bitch. So how it works is your opponent, if they're losing, can exhaust one of your models. And normally, typically, this would be used to exhaust your most killy thing, right? Make their killy thing a lot harder to activate. So if I was to exhaust something, I would likely exhaust something like Molog, or potentially the Bolt Boy boss if he's out of range, right? Well, for him, he is well aware after the first game the horrors of the Trueblood countering Molog, and yeah, so I mistakenly took the lead. So normally in a mission where there's a really strong twist, I often try to purposely lose the first turn, score lower on the first turn so I can reap an advantage on turn 2, and then take that advantage and then really push through on turn 3, turn 4, and then take the win. And this works very well. It's how I tend to play these kind of missions. I didn't this time. I don't know why. I don't know why. I just didn't. I went in very aggressively. I scored some points early, and that gave me the lead. And this led to a repeated exhausting of the True Blood of the whole game, to the point where the True Blood didn't get to net Mollog a single time, and this forced me to do some rather unconventional things. This again was a kill mission, but it also had a quarters objective kind of thing where if you hold the most quarters, you score points. And not being able to net Mollog was nightmarish because that was my main counter. I can't kill Mollog. He has way too many wounds. His toughness is way too high, and his damage will one-shot pretty much anything in my list. So netting Mollog is the answer, and I couldn't, which meant in a kill mission I had to get creative. And how I did that was I sent in planes runners, one after the other, and had them die. Now, that's really unfortunate for me because in a kill mission, I am literally feeding him kills from turn 2 onwards to prevent Mollog going in and killing something far more valuable, like an F-limb, like a Heart Eater, like a First Fang, right? These things have to survive. Even Apotrax being movement 4 with fly is actually incredibly important. It's having a puller as well to pull things out of quarters, into quarters, that kind of stuff is really powerful when our warbands are roughly the same size. And this game was pain. Having to send things in to block Mollog the whole game was pretty difficult. However, the rest of the game was a bit of a grind in the best kind of way. So his Bolt Boy boss is always a threat. So again, the plan against any Bolt Boy boss is to get within 6 inches so they can't aim to shot you because they have to move back. If they do, they can't aim shot and their damage is substantially lower. So turn 1, turn 2, I sprinted as many guys as I possibly could up the board to secure quarters and to get into this sweet spot to not be overly shot by this Bolt Boy boss. Now, the issue with that is I dedicated so many resources to killing this Bolt Boy boss, and spoiler, it didn't die until turn 4. And yeah, that was not great. It meant that I was really struggling to get anything done. Having all my big hitters like the Heart Eater, like the First Fang, all focusing on this Bolt Boy boss who was also running away a lot, meant that I was really ineffective in scoring points, and the game was, as a result, very, very close. I was bleeding points every turn and not really gaining enough points to gain a substantial lead from that sacrifice. So at the start of turn 3, it dawned on me that I don't actually have enough models to stop Mollog forever. He is now getting closer and closer and closer to my really squishy stuff, and I might not be able to maintain this very, very small lead. So the solution was Kindlefinger. So Kindlefinger being dead is less of an impact than losing F-limb. F-limb is worth many, many points being a hero and a kill, and it's bad. F-limb dying, the Heart Eater dying, these are really, really bad for me. So I had to set up Kindlefinger in such a way that he could impact 2 quarters, be far enough away that he couldn't be shot by the Bolt Boy boss, and also far enough away that my opponent couldn't reach him with anything else for the next 2 turns, whilst also being roughly within 12 inches of F-limb, and do some sneaky stuff on turn 4 as Bolt Boy boss was starting to die. Of course, I lost another chaff model to the altar of Mollog, and it was looking a little bit rough once turn 4 started because he got a high quad, which meant Mollog could just rampage the fuck through and kill potentially 2 guys. And that would possibly lead to the game falling out of my hands at the last moment and getting the loss, because one of the models in his path was F-limb, and this is where the wonders of the Warcry ability dice system lie, right? I only had 1 double and 4 singles. He had a quad, which meant that at most he had 2 singles, so I had a much weaker turn than him, but I basically guaranteed initiative. So I kept my double, I just left it at that, I took my turn, and that's where the magic happened. F-limb was in the danger zone. He was about to get charged by Mollog and he would be dead, almost guaranteed. So F-limb blasted out 2 wizard bolts, killed a shank, or killed somebody, I think killed maybe an orc, And then he teleported to Kindlefinger on the other side of the board, way out of range of Mollog's threat range. And the best part was, Kindlefinger gets to place within 3 inches of Ephelim. He placed out of range of Mollog. So not only did Ephelim not die, he got to safety, secured a quarter, got a kill, and also meant that Mollog couldn't go on a chain-killing rampage, basically. Mollog then goes, he kills another Planesrunner, but that's really it. He kills a Planesrunner, but then I land the final blow and finally kill off the Bolt Boy boss, scoring me some points, and also securing the quarter, and that basically ends the game. And what a game it was. It was incredibly difficult again. Not having access to my support, to my control pieces, really makes this list struggle. And again, I had to get creative, and it all came down to positioning, and Kindlefinger was the catalyst to this. Had Kindlefinger been shot off the board early, had Kindlefinger been placed wrong at any point, had Kindlefinger not been moved to a very specific place on turn 3, then Ephelim would have likely been killed, because he could teleport to Apatrax, but that puts him too close to Torka in this case, and Torka would likely kill Ephelim, and Spawnmaw was already dead. So the only option was this very specifically placed Kindlefinger to escape death, and it paid off. Moving up Planesrunners to body block and distract Mollog and slow him down was really important for this game to end in my favor. Placing them like 2.1 inches away in the most inopportune location, so he had to move and then swing, so he's only moving a very small amount, right, every turn, was very important for this game to work. And seeing that path to victory, seeing that, well, that potential path to victory in replacing the Trueblood with literal bodies in a kill mission was a really fun thing to do, and the fact that it paid off as well was really interesting to see. But it does once again highlight a massive weakness of this list, and that my primary control piece is the Trueblood. If the Trueblood dies or is out of commission in any way, this list really struggles if there's something big on the board after 2 fairly dominant games, especially when the first game I believe I had with this list was against Joe, and that was a fairly dominant win against Joe because of the Trueblood. And seeing Joe obviously learn that lesson and be cool, I'm going to use what I can here to stymie that Trueblood, and then see him then basically roll through the list fairly effectively. It was pretty cool to see as well, right? Seeing other people learn, grow, and improve is always fantastic. And whilst Road to Gold is about my growth and my path to gold, ultimately playing the same people multiple times is fantastic, right? You get to see other people's progression, and Joe's slight list tweaks and the way he dealt with Ephelim and his trickery was great. He knew the tricks now, and he wasn't as overwhelmed by the things I could do, and the veil of Ephelim's overwhelming power due to his mobility and trickery starts to fade, and you can see the real issue, which was the Trueblood, and he dealt with that effectively, and that's really cool to see. But that's Road to Gold this week. It was a lot of fun, landing a win, landing a draw, learning a lot of lessons, and finding holes in my list. Love to see it, right? This is the whole point of the series. I hope you enjoyed the ramble too. So yeah, I'll see you all next week. Leave a comment down below with what you think of Road to Gold, what you think I should maybe change in the list, how you would deal with Ephelim, how you would deal with a Mollog in a scenario where you didn't have any control or Titans. That'd be a fun little thought experiment to tackle there, right? But until next time, lads, ladies, and everybody in between and beyond, ta-ra.
Groovy.
Hey all, and welcome to the post-toast credits. A massive shouts out to my algorithmic demon slayers, Andy Morris, blah blah blah, the Head Knight of Paint, Heinz D, Long Run Hobbies, Lord Phylax, Maps, Sable Saber, Steph, Steve Bean, the Houston Toad, Tough, Tootin' Baby, and Velas. A huge thank you for supporting the channel, and I will catch you all next time. Ta-ra!